May the Lord open and blessed be the fruit. I'm not even gonna try and do the opening. I invite myself again today, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these topics in a little bit deeper when she is back. But I had to talk about it. I have to talk about it. I am recording this on the day the Supreme Court upheld the TikTok ban. And as a woman in this country, that's scary for what it starts or could start. We don't know what's going to happen, but the idea that TikTok wasn't free speech is insane. The idea that TikTok didn't even really get a chance to argue, and their argument that it was a national security concern is a bunch of fucking bullshit, because we went through this before. TikTok moved all the US data servers they moved it out of the US, and people can blame TikTok for not selling. But the reality is, when you live in the tech world, when you live in the design world as engineers, you're not going to sell your fucking IP. And for TikTok, while an algorithm can be replicated in theory, it has yet to be done. Platforms like YouTube, platforms like Instagram have yet to replicate the community, the algorithm, and the worldwide connection people have felt on TikTok. But I'm more concerned. Yes, I will miss TikTok, and I have talked ad nauseum on other podcasts about that. But I am more concerned about what this means for me and my co-host as engineers as they start to undo DEI. And yes, there are problems with DEI, just like there are problems with everything else. I am not pro DEI and I'm not anti DEI. I think some of the initiatives are necessary. I think sexual harassment training is necessary. I think harassment training in general is necessary in the workplace, because shit like that, especially when you live in a STEM world, is rampant. And even with the training, it still happens, and it's very hard to get them fired without every inch of proof. I had not sexual harassment by any stretch of the imagination, but harassment for sure in the Dragon Lady situation that we've talked about. And no one protected me, no one protected my co-host, and no one really even cared, to be honest. In management, in HR, and that is a product, in my opinion, of the area that we were working in at the time, because that wasn't my first job in that area, and I tried, despite my better judgment, still went back and experienced the same thing. And guess whose company is also in that area? SpaceX. I can only imagine that the culture around that area has proceeded to get worse over the years. It's always been bad, in my opinion, but it only gets worse from here, and that is unfortunate. But the other thing is, what does this mean for us? We look at what Zuckerberg is doing with his platforms and his offices. He has said that the workplace has lost its masculine energy, and that the workplace has become too feminine. While I would love a workplace that celebrates aggressiveness, not in the way that they mean. I, as a female, have always been hated on for being aggressive. I have repeatedly had conversations with management about how aggressive I am. And I believe that is mostly because of the boulders on my chest and the genitalia I have, if you will. If we really want to talk about this shit, because at the moment of recording, Trump hasn't taken office yet, and a bill to Yeetus deletus, the Department of Education, has been introduced, and a resolution to make women's health care address the needs of men. And we'll get further into that conversation and how that leads into a Handmaid's Tale scenario, if anything happened with that. It has been introduced by two men. There are plenty of women in that world, government, if you will, and yet two men are the ones who are talking about women's health care. What? However, the Supreme Court, while it doesn't surprise me the decision they made about TikTok, has started the beginning. While all of the TikTok arguments were being made, the US military also declared Tencent, which for those who aren't deeply in online gaming culture, Tencent, well, they declared Tencent as a military asset. Let me finish that thought. But Tencent is a gaming company that is owned by China, I believe, that owns a lot of stake in a lot of US gaming companies. They basically have their hands in everything. However, they have a majority stake in some pretty big properties here in the States. League of Legends, Valorant. We don't know, to my knowledge, from what I've seen, how much they own of Discord, which is a platform I use all the time, and I could see the US wanting to get rid of due to a classified information leak and the fact that people are moving in drones from Facebook groups to places like Discord. Daddy Zuck has an interest in that one too, unfortunately. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I naturally am. My pattern recognition has taught me to be a pessimist, unfortunately. And while I have, and you can go back in the episodes, I have always said I didn't think while Project 2025 was valid concern of the people who had read it and studied it, I didn't think that the reality of it was going to happen. And while I still think there's a lot of work to get to Project 2025, I'm worried more of it will come to exist than what was originally my opinion. And that's not because I've changed my political thoughts, right? We've talked a lot on this episode or on this podcast. Ash and I have gone back and forth because she is much more left-leaning than I am. I am very much so centrist, but I am also very much so a realist. What is being put in front of us could be the beginning of turning the states not only inside against themselves, but isolating us from the rest of the world. And I'm not okay with that. I am not okay with the idea of my friends and family getting drafted to go fight our allies. I am not okay with the idea of having to ask my husband, while I fully know he would sign away his life if it was what I wanted. And he needed to, not that I'm saying this would be that extreme, but I'm not okay with them saying that women have to have the approval of men to get things like birth control. I'm not okay with that. Even though I am a married woman who knows my husband would sign whatever he needed to sign for whatever I wanted. I'm still not okay with being my husband's property. And again, I know my husband would not treat me like that. But the law will allow some husbands, if things roll the way they're rolling currently, to treat their spouses like property. Not saying that people don't already do, because they do. Welcome to religious culture. And when I say welcome to religious culture, there is an interesting, funny tidbit, if you will, related to the TikTok ban that I think is a little bit of levity in all of this. And somehow people still voted for this man. The man that's getting called out across all of TikTok right now, who is proudly screaming how he blocked the 270-day extension that Senator Ed Markey, I think, tried to introduce, is associated with one of the most infamous reality TV show people. And for those who don't watch trashy reality TV, that person is Josh Duggar. Just like the world was focused on mommy vlogger Ruby Frankie, Josh Duggar is a similar but not the same situation. Josh Duggar and his family, 19 kids and counting, or Josh Duggar and his siblings, because he's not the 19 kids' parents, but he's the oldest of the 19 siblings, and they were on reality TV for God knows how long. And they were on reality TV not only for their very large family, but kind of got a lot of interest from people due to their religious beliefs and their structure. They were a part of a group called the IBLP, Institute of Basic Life Principles, and they had a lot of weird non-scripture based beliefs that they said were a part of their religious beliefs. Things like the girls weren't allowed to wear pants. They would go to things like the beach in this reality show in jeans. And people can do what they want. I'm not judging that. Like, gained a lot of interest because people were curious how these people lived their lives, especially by the end where they had 19 kids. But they had become similar to other reality TV stars like the Sister Wives or the Bates family, or I mean, even not reality TV, but mommy vlogger Ruby Franke, known for their religion, known for being this wholesome, almost perfect, idealistic family. And then you came to find out years later that their oldest son had done some things to his sisters that were of the illegal variety. On top of was a part of the Ashley Madison hack, and was later, after all of that came out, arrested for CSAM. And the dude was heavily involved in government in Arkansas and heavily interacted with some of the people that are currently in our government. So just take that and run with it, do it as you will, because some of these senators are fighting for the protection of women in silly trans bills that only impact a very small amount of people, and yet they palled around with not good people. If you're watching the video, you really know what I said. But those are the types of people that are hanging around your elected officials. Just thought I would put that out there, Arkansas. The humor behind the person who's claiming TikTok is such a threat to our generation, and yet he palled around with someone who really was a threat to his own children if he has them. Anyways, I don't know what this means. Upholding the TikTok ban as constitutional opens the doors to ban all sorts of foreign things. The Switch 2 was just announced, which as a gamer, I love. But between potential tariffs from foreign countries and Nintendo, yes, Japan is an ally, but you never know. Trump has gone after several of our allies already, or threatened to go after several of our allies. And people can keep saying, it's a joke, it's a joke, it's a joke, but when do we take him seriously? I hope this administration does good. I really do. I genuinely do. I am struggling to see how this administration is going to do good. And I want to dig a little deeper into the Zuckerberg of it all, the House resolution bill of it all. The Department of Education, I understand it impacts a lot of families. However, I am not as well versed in that one because I don't have kids. I know for a fact that if my family member that is handicapped was still in the school system, it would impact that side of my family. I know it'll impact a lot of my family that's currently in school because I'm assuming they aren't paying out of pocket for their colleges and their higher education. But to that point, there are a lot of put women in their places kind of things coming out. And that's why I started this with the line from Handmaid's Tale. There's the House resolution that, again, has only just been introduced. There's nothing going on with it. But that resolution not only has the line that everyone and their mother is talking about that says women's healthcare should address the needs of men, families, and community or something, but specifically the part everyone's talking about is that it should address the needs of men. What I think is more concerning is they are trying to fund government pro-women's health centers and dictate that that's where you go for your healthcare as a woman. And those pro centers, when you look into them, are in fact anti-contraception. And of course, if they're anti-contraception, they're also eating and deleting. And while people can have their opinions on the other one all they want, contraception, I don't think is something that is up for debate. people should be allowed to do as they wish. And there's a lot of conversation about federal bans and everything else. And there are loopholes to federal bans. There are loopholes like the Comstock Act. There are loopholes like FDA approvals for certain medications. There are many things that could be done in an anti-contraceptive name without actually calling it anti-contraceptive. This resolution being one of them. This resolution could mean that all women have to have some male partner on top of the pro-women centers, right? That's a whole different government tracking your healthcare as a woman, your OBG. They're basically government funded, not government funded, but government controlled. Health, you know what I mean. Government controlled centers that would be the only care available to you, which is not comprehensive and not competitive and not free market of the US. Anyways, the address the needs of men. A lot of people are questioning, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And the reality is that probably means the first step of what you see in The Handmaid's Tale. That's probably what that means. If we're talking about women's healthcare needing to address the needs of men, we're talking about getting their approval before you do anything. And there's already a lot of places and physicians that won't do things like tubulars and hysterectomies without the approval of a spouse or a extreme medical need. And I worry for the people that don't have spouses that are loving and kind and will do anything. I thankfully don't have to worry too much if that does, but I know there are lots of people that do. My co-host, for one, doesn't have a legal a legal spouse. She would have to go back to her father in the case of this, is my point. And she's a grown-ass adult, you know? So that resolution, while I think it's kind of DOA, I don't know that it will go very far. There are still enough. I say this as so many things have been DOA that shouldn't have been, and so many things that have been passed that don't make sense. I would say that there's still, even with the majority, that there's still Republicans that aren't Trump supporters in our government, but I have yet to been proven that to be true. I say this as a full support of the elected officials. However, I don't know if we do still have some sane ones there at this point. We likely do. However, that resolution is scary. That resolution, if it gets much further than where it's at now, could mean a lot of impacts for a lot of women. The next one that is a very almost pro The Handmaid's Tale first steps is the repealing and rollback of protections in the workplace. They've made it clear, at least in Project 2025, if you want to follow that, and by their actions thus far, and speeches and things like that, a lot of the right, not all, but a lot of the right have made it clear that they would rather women stay home and be little mothers and housewives. They want us to be at home with the babies and cleaning the house. And if you want that for your life, don't come in. If that's what you want, great. If that is your thing, I applaud you for being able to do it. Because I know a lot of people want it and can't do it. And then there are people that just flat out don't want it. And then there's the ones that can and do. If that's what you want, great. And if you want support, I am okay with providing support for the people that want that. I'm not okay with removing the choice. And it's happening here in Florida, even. I've seen a lot of conversation about this new Board of Trustees member who was installed at the University of West Florida, I think, UWF, one of the universities here in Florida. And he has been on the record stating that women shouldn't be in college, shouldn't be pursuing higher education, that we are just delaying our natural, very Harrison Butker, if you will, that we're just delaying our natural path of being mothers when we go to school. And he has also been on the record stating things like every effort should be made to not recruit women into engineering, law, and medical. And I'm sure Basically, any STEM degree is really what he means. As an engineer, fuck you, dude. As a female engineer who did my years into school, fuck you for that opinion, because while I'm not in love with my career, and I have said that a lot on this podcast, I still did the work. That's how I pay my bills. So fuck you. I wouldn't. What? Why are you on a board of trustees for a school if you don't believe females should be attending it? Yeah. That's what's happening here in Florida. And then you've got the confirmation hearings for our Secretary of Defense pick, Pete Hegseth, who doesn't believe women should be in combat roles. And before you come into my comments and argue, well, the standards are lowered, I absolutely want to employ you to go see the real reason standards are being lowered. And it's not because of women. There are many women in the military that argue against lowering the standards for them because of situations like this, where people are going to tell them they will never get the respect they deserve because the standard is different. But people forget that the standards in the military have been lowered over the last few years because America is obese as shit. Even members currently in the military can't pass their own PT tests because they aren't training after their initial passes when they're not on deployment. Let alone getting people through the door in the first place. Recruitment and retention in the military has been significantly declining for a plethora of reasons, but being able to pass medical and PT is a big one. There are many, many people who could not pass medical or PT out of the gate. And that's why the standards got lowered. It's not because of women, you misogynistic fucks. So you've got that one being installed into, in theory, we don't know he's being confirmed yet, but at the moment, I don't know that he's being confirmed. But through his hearing, he was repetitively asked about women in combat roles because he's made it very, very clear that he doesn't respect half of the military, essentially. And that he wants to remove them and send them home to just be mothers. And that if you are in the military, you shouldn't be allowed to be a mom either. And that is mind-boggling because they want the kids, right? They want the family, the nuclear family, but they don't want them to, support that family, which makes no fucking sense. So you've got that. You've got the people being installed repetitively to kind of deter women from participating in things like my career currently. And then on top of that, they are now removing, not necessarily removing, but also removing in a way. If you remove things like sexual harassment training every year, you're probably going to get a lot more people just fucking doing it. So you're removing a lot of those initiatives from the workplace, making it more uncomfortable. There is a TikToker who is a part of the lawsuit against the government who has a small business, and I love her small business. I will shout her out for the days to come because I think her story is inspirational, but also her cookies are damn fucking good. Like, I need to order more. They're so good. And I was going to get a whole bunch of them for Christmas too, but everybody else just brings desserts, so I just didn't, and I should have. I got the Nutella one, and it's reinvigorated my love for Nutella. That's not important. Anyways, her name is Chloe, and she's told her story a lot. But there is one piece of her story that, if is currently allowed, is only going to get worse from here. She had stated that her TikTok journey started because when she went to her employer at the time and told them she was pregnant, they fired her. And one may be thinking, isn't that illegal? Isn't that, if you don't have the resources to fight that wrongful termination, no one's going to do anything about it. And in certain states, they don't have to provide a real reason for firing you. They can kind of just do it. And I foresee a lot more of that coming with this administration, specifically of women, obviously, who want to continue. I also see a lot of the protections for things like breastfeeding in the workplace. Not literally breastfeeding, but like pumping, pump breaks. That's what I was trying to say. For breastfeeding mothers, pump break protections and pump rooms. I know a lot of the facilities I've worked in, because they are so male dominated, have had to, in the recent years, with some of the new laws that have come out about pump breaks and things like that, had to create that space. They didn't exist, even though they should have. Because working moms are a thing, and a mother shouldn't have to choose between that connection and bond, if they feel it through breastfeeding with their child, and being able, not necessarily, but like pump, God, I'm not a mom and you can tell, but you know what I mean. They shouldn't have to choose between, being forced to feed their kid formula when they can provide themselves, if you will. That's a weird way of putting it. Because their workplace won't allow them to pump throughout the day as they're supposed to. And the funny thing about that is, especially now with all of the like cordless and hands-free pumps and things that have come out, if no one's stopping by your desk, I mean, I personally think if we're not going to give moms maternity leave that's worth a damn, we should at least allow them to work remote. Obviously, that's not a capability for all moms. The production should exist regardless of remote work capability. But if the candidate is allowed, like, fucking let them. Let them be at home. Let them be comfortable. Let them do what they need to do. If you're going to force them to come back after an absurd amount of time, let them be comfortable. Anyways, like, I'm not a mom, and I don't know that I ever will be, but I will advocate the shit out of for moms, because they are super people. The working ones especially, but all moms are superhuman. I guess there's pieces to that too, but like, you know what I mean. The moms, anyways, I'm gonna get myself in trouble if I keep talking about a topic that I am, I'm not a mom. But point being is, I can see more and more of the force them out by making them uncomfortable situations. However, you're going to just continue to decline, especially women's mental health in this situation, because like I said, there are many women who want to do that stay-at-home mom life and just can't. So what do you do then? Huh, US government? What do you do then? You don't fucking help, is what I'm saying there. So you've got the frat boy culture coming back to STEM places, to tech bros. I mean, tech bros have always been frat boys. Let's be real. Zuck wants to fit in so bad that he is just pulling exactly the Musk pipeline. And then you've got Musk, who is literally lying about being a gamer. Like, how not cool do you have to be to lie about being a gamer? Because we're nerds. We're dweebs. Like, we're not cool. Let's be real. We would get picked on unless you were like a Call of Duty gamer. But even then, for the most part, like, if you were so like into it and wrapped into it, you would get picked on. We're not cool. So lying about being the number one speedrunner in Diablo 4 and Path of Exile 2, like, why? Anyways, you've got frat boy culture coming back to the workplace. You've got bills being introduced about women's healthcare where women are kind of the last thought. You've got TikTok being banned, which could lead to things like Tencent being banned, and could lead to, I don't know other like, so many companies are owned by so many different people. Who else? I mean, obviously Shein and Temu are probably going to end up on the chopping block too. But like, I just, what do you want from us? Because I would love to say I'm optimistic for the next 4 years and the administration is going to be great. But they are proving that they want to turn this country into a frat house. And I was a sorority girl. I don't want to live in a frat house. It's sticky and gross, and I love hanging out with the guys, but goddamn, no, I don't want to live in a frat house. I I am not hating on any of the fraternity boys that I spent a lot of time with, but they were boys. They were not men at that point in time. A lot of them have grown up into being great people, but we were all young, dumb, and stupid. That's why we were in college. Some would even say my husband and I were young, dumb, and stupid when we got married. And to some extent, I would agree. We have grown a lot together. I would not put what we did on anybody else. We made that choice to get married at 22 and we understood what choice we were making. I wouldn't force anybody into that at all. It was a choice. If you don't want to be legally married to your spouse or significant other, you shouldn't have to. And I foresee a lot of that coming into this because so many people are using the scripture as weapons. And I am not your average, like, religious person, right? I am spiritual in a way, but I don't, go to church every Sunday. But I grew up around all of that. And I'm not an atheist. I'm agnostic because I grew up around so many different world religions. And why are we determined to hurt everyone with scripture? Why? It doesn't. And AOC, there's a clip of AOC going around right now where she talks a lot about that, where scripture is only invoked for the purpose of bigotry. And that's kind of how I feel. If you want to be a bad person, in my opinion, then go do it. But don't force it on me. Because your magic book, and I don't say that to be flippant about religion. I know a lot of people respect the Bible but I respect all religions. I'm just saying that as a statement, right? Because to some, that's how they're treating it. It is only going to hurt your argument more the more you throw scriptures at people that are truly atheist. I can see where people stand with their religion and feel how deeply they love it and respect that. Not a lot of people can, especially the ones that are deconstructing religion in a very harsh way due to abuse they faced in the religions they grew up in. And they have the right to feel that way. I hope that anyone who is going through that type of deconstruction gets to a point where they can coexist with other religious people without yelling at them for believing in nonsense, as they would say. I don't want that. I don't want that in my government. I can respect your boundaries on a personal level. I don't want that at a federal level. And I think that's my biggest issue right now. I don't want your religious beliefs put into law. And you can say the country was founded on a religious background, but it literally wasn't. And one of the interesting things that have come out of the TikTok ban is people discovering that the world is bigger than the US. The world is much, much bigger than the US. And the reason I am such a centrist the way I am is because the world is bigger than the US. I was very well traveled, and that is a luxury, I will admit. But going overseas and experiencing a different school system changed how I thought about the American education system. And I have always been, since I was 13, I have been anti the American school system. It is trash. It is garbage. It needs to be thrown away and redone. And that's not teachers' fault. I will strictly say that is not teachers' fault. But abolishing the Department of Education doesn't get that done either. Centrist. I have seen the love and acceptance from other countries when me, the foreigner who doesn't speak their language, shows up and wants to just experience their culture, but I don't know where I'm going. And you know what countries I've experienced the most of that acceptance in? Asian ones. We are trained to believe that this country is the best and baddest out there, and in some places and some scenarios, we might be. But that doesn't mean we're the only people that exist. It's the similar argument for why TikTok shouldn't sell to the US. They're bowing down to a bully if they do. You have tech bros running the country. Tech bro billionaires running the country. if you will. You have right-wing extremists that are not aligned with their party because the party is infighting within themselves with the Republicans right now. You have Musk and Ramaswamy going online and telling everybody that H-1B visas are the only way to get things done. I mean, SpaceX and Tesla are two of the highest H-1B visa employers in the United States. So they want to talk about it, but they're a part of the party that essentially doesn't want any form of immigration. And H-1B visas is, in fact, a way to immigrate, which I find hilarious given some of the people in the higher ups of the Republican ranks. Most of them either have spouses that are immigrants or are immigrants themselves. Just humorous things about politics, in my opinion. But so you've got the tech bro billionaires that are trying to run the world like a tech bro company. And world, I mean truly, because what we do here in the US ends up impacting a lot of other people. And I wish more of the US citizens saw that. It's not just about us, unfortunately. If it was just about us, great. We can fuck our own selves up and then we can move on. But it's not. What we do impacts the rest of the world. And just like Ray, we saw a huge change in US thought process when it comes to a foreign conflict. We've seen a huge change in US thought process when it comes to foreign conflict. We are now seeing TikTok users flocking to a literal Chinese owned app, whether they get hacked or not. And I'm not saying that is a possibility. I've heard of things, rumors for me at the moment. No one has been hacked. It's not fear mongering. It's a very real possibility. But to the same point, all of our US accounts have been hacked at some point too, or attempted to be hacked. So hacking is not unique to signing on to other countries' app, but given that you can't even attempt to read the terms of service when you get violations for your content and everything else. Anyways, they are getting on that app. They are seeing how they're being respectful, because I've heard that a lot of people are not being respectful. But of the ones that are being respectful, they are witnessing what it's like to live in another country via this social media app. They're seeing, and TikTok was very similar in that sense. There was a lot of eye opening that happened with getting on a more worldwide platform. Because the thing is, with Facebook and Instagram, is they're US owned, so they're very US focused and very pro US. Whether that's intentional or not, that's what happens. Facebook, especially because the core of Facebook is friends, right? If you're not friends with someone, you're probably not seeing their content unless you're in groups and things like that. But Instagram allowed for a little bit wider reach and started that kind of influencer numbers culture. But even then, I would experience Canada at best. And even YouTube is I get a lot of Canada, but I don't get much any other creators, right? I started to see other creators from other countries when I got on Twitch, because you're just looking for a game. Usually you want to watch the gameplay, or you're connecting with a group of creators or whatever. And yes, YouTube can do that too, but point being is connecting in a worldwide level was kind of brought to US minds by TikTok. And now they're starting to see more and more of it as TikTok is looming a lights out. And I love it and I hate it at the same time, because I recognize that bombarding someone else's space with a bunch of US users could put red flags up in the country that we're bombarding. And that could change the experience and they could get rid of it entirely because they don't want too much information getting displayed to their citizens. Governments are the issue here, not the people. The people have never been the issue, despite what we've been told and bred and taught to believe. The people are never the issue. It's always governments, in my opinion. But we are entering a time where, as an engineer, as a female, we're either going to be forced into a workplace that is so anti work-life balance, because that to some people is considered a part of the feminization of the workplace. Having a life outside of work and not wanting to work 60 to 80 hours a week is considered lazy nowadays. Not wanting to bust ass for an employer that doesn't give two shits about you is considered lazy. You are considered an engineer who is not of a certain caliber if you don't want to work overtime. You are considered not talented, especially in the early days. If you look at someone like Elon running SpaceX and Tesla the way he does as not something to aspire to, there is a shift coming. Whether it's as extreme as people want to think it is, I don't know. But we are shifting. And is it good shift? Is it a rightful correction of the two extreme to the left pull some believe we may have taken? This will impact every industry. This will impact the economy. Everything we're looking at in the next, I'll say 2 years, because there's only so much you can do with executive orders, but you can do enough damage on day one with executive orders that's scary. In previous episode I talked about remote work, and I love the fact that people are mentioning that Republicans are screaming about remote work and return to office and firing federal employees, and yet someone pointed out that Trump likes to constantly work from Mar-a-Lago, and he doesn't spend much time at the White House as president. And someone was like, well, isn't that remote work? Yes, it is. But that's the irony. It's rules for thee and not for me. And that is another thing we could see. During the confirmation hearings, that there has been some conversations surrounding the laying off of a lot of federal workers. And here's another kind of weird centrist opinion of mine, I don't disagree with putting more of a focus on performance for federal employees rather than purely being comfortable by basically securing their job after a year. I have seen what lazy federal workers look like, and I don't disagree that performance should be a factor in whether or not they stay. That doesn't mean the entire government needs to be gutted. That doesn't mean thousands upon thousands of federal civil servants need to be ripped of a job. And especially, it shouldn't be an instantaneous thing where we are basically dumping thousands upon thousands of people into the no job market because you would do TikTok and then you would do the federal workforce. And then, because the other thing people aren't thinking about with TikTok is there are people who work at TikTok in the US. Those people, in theory, are all out of a job now because the Supreme Court upheld the ban. We are living in, I would say, unprecedented times, but that seems to always be the case for millennials. We are living in a world that we don't know the future, and my pattern recognition is trying to find the pattern, and there doesn't seem to be one, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe being unpredictable is what exactly this country needs right now. But it could also be the opposite, and likely will be mostly the opposite for most people. There doesn't seem to be a lot of focus on fixing the homelessness crisis. There doesn't seem to be a lot of focus on fixing living life, if you will. And I don't say that meaning raising minimum wage, because there is an argument to be made that minimum wage jobs aren't meant to be careers. However, even career salaries haven't really kept up with the extreme housing market and everything else. I know people who I work with, so they're engineers and senior ones at that, at this point, that can't afford to buy. And we're not minimum wage workers. So when you look at it like that, there's something that needs to be done, whether it's stopping big corporations from buying up property and renting them out like crazy, because the rental market is just as bad. I don't know what the answer is. There's something that needs to be done, but I don't know what the answer is, and I didn't like either side's answer. So, when you look at that, are we really looking at Handmaid's Tale? Is this the future? I don't want to say yes. And I don't want to fearmonger. I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm literally just having a conversation with what it feels like as an engineer on the day that the TikTok ban was upheld. Because as someone who is in the tech world, as someone who is in the who is in tech bro world workforce, as a female in engineering, which is very male dominated, as a female in the fitness space, which is also very male dominated, I don't know that more masculine energy is the answer. I don't know that completely gutting DEI initiatives, while again, it has gone too far in certain cases, gutting those protections, especially, right? Engineering tends to lean very right. For whatever reason, I don't know why that is, but that is kind of statistically known at this point, that engineers tend to be more right leaning for whatever reason. Maybe it's because we're more a little rough and tumble. I don't know. I don't know how that works out. Maybe because we're very science focused, but that doesn't seem to be the Republicans' thought process right now. Science. Anyways, not the point. I'm not trying to hate. I'm just being realistic here. I don't know why, but engineers tend to lean very right. Maybe it's because one of our major employers is in fact the DoD. I don't know. But I have had a lot of members of the LGBT community that I work with say that in recent years, they've been more okay with being open, but for the most part, they are not super open at work because they're already afraid of retaliation due to their identity. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm not okay with. People should be able to do their jobs if they're working employees, similar to the federal government. If they are performing well, it doesn't matter what they do. At home, it doesn't matter. Well, okay, federal government is a little bit different because you're a representative, but you know what I mean. I don't care what you do at home. I don't, but going after those people purely because of their identity is wrong. Going after females in the workplace purely because they're females and telling them to get back in the kitchen is wrong. Let people do their jobs, go home, and call it a day. You don't have to be best friends with your coworkers, and you don't have to want to go grab a beer. You really don't even have to do anything other than communicate about the job with them because it's work. It is not social hour. And I hate, and that's a different topic entirely, but I hate companies that put such a focus on culture when it's literally do your job, get out, get done, get paid. Anyways, I can foresee spaces like my own losing a lot of not only females, but losing a lot of LGBTQ members. And some of the best damn engineers I've ever known have been a part of that culture, a part of the LGBTQ. So I don't want to see those employees flee because they're scared of what might happen, especially here in Florida. But it is a likelihood, and that's the kind of shit I don't want to deal with as an engineer. And that's the kind of shit I have a feeling I'm going to end up dealing with as an engineer here in Florida. There's definitely a change coming with this new administration coming in. I don't want to live in fear, so I'm not going to. But we are seeing more and more signs and more possibilities of looking like The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm not going to ignore that because history repeating is, well, when you don't know history, it repeats and you're doomed to fail in the process. And we might be looking at that. We might be looking at a tech bro version of history. I would love for this administration, and I'm saying this now, so no one can say that I'm not. I would love for this administration to be benign. I would love for Trump to save TikTok. And I will fully give the credit to Trump, even though I'm not really sure he's the one that deserves the credit. I think Shao would, the owner of TikTok, would be the one who really deserved the credit for literally putting his tail between his legs and sucking up to Trump to make sure it gets saved for the 7 million users here in the States, or 700 million. It's in the millions, and there's a lot of us, and there's a lot of small businesses that will be hurt. So if Xiao, because the people are talking about how he'll be at the inauguration and everything else, I fully believe that the owner of TikTok, CEO of TikTok, is showing up to Trump's inauguration to try and save face and save that app for the rest of us. And that is a leader, in my opinion. He is putting his personal opinions aside, putting his tail between his legs, and cozying up to Trump. Now, I don't know. I don't want the at what cost to save TikTok being something like selling it to Musk or selling it to Zuckerberg or selling it to Bezos or any of the other big tech billionaires that, well, Bezos isn't tech, but you know what I mean. The big billionaires that already own too much of this country in their pockets. I don't want that. I do not want to save TikTok at the expense of that. However, I think it takes a lot to put your own opinions aside, given that Trump was the one originally trying to get TikTok banned. Put your opinions aside. Show up, show respect to save it for the users. And I could be totally wrong. He could just be an asshole, and that's not the vibe I get from what I've seen being a user of TikTok. It's not the vibe. I get the vibe of he's doing what he can to save it. And if that means cozying up to Trump, that means cozying up to Trump. And I respect that. I respect doing what you need to do to save your business and the users who are crying at your feet, quite literally, to save their livelihoods when their government won't do it for them. And I know this episode has been kind of all over the place, but I needed to talk about it. And I felt like this was kind of the right space because the shift in corporate America is coming with this administration. The shift in and like development is coming with this administration, because another thing, if you look at Project 2025, is expedited development on certain projects and programs in the engineering space. That could mean a lot of things. Expedited could mean we're going to force you, for threat of your job, to get all of these things done in impossible timelines because we need them yesterday and you haven't been developing quick enough. It could be that. Or it could simply just mean removing some of the regulations to allow for quicker and expedited development. It could be that. We don't know, but I'm interested to find out and hopeful. The very small piece of optimism. The very small piece of autism. The very small piece of autism. No, that's a very big piece of me. The very small piece of optimism I have left going into this administration is hopeful that it's just going to be benign and maybe even good for small business, for TikTok, for women. The patterns are not saying, yes, that is true. But for now, that's all we have. And at a certain point, there's nothing we can do. SCOTUS has proved that to us. I don't want a more masculine workplace. I think I got enough of that. I don't want the possibility of having things like maternity leave and pump rooms and other things that in the world that I have kids. I don't want that to go away. I don't want my ability to work to go away. And yes, that is extreme. I'm not saying that'll happen. That would take, again, that would take a lot to really loophole your way to ban women from voting, from working, from owning their own bank accounts, to really go back to the good old times, as some people believe. There would be a lot of deprogramming to do, and I don't know that that's possible. I'm not a poli-sci expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I am a little worried. So, Continue to join us as the world and the corporate life fucks us all, because this is the end of this episode. I will be back with my co-host with an episode that I've been holding on to for a little bit, so that we recorded before, I think, Christmas. So be aware of that. Then that one's a little old, in order to give myself some time to edit new episodes we were recording to make them a little bit more timely. But I promise she will be back. We were just having some issues aligning on times and things like that. So I just had to talk about it. It's too in the moment to not talk about it. So welcome to the ride, Chaos Gremlins. We're about to see how far two women in a STEM space can get before everything crumbles. And that is a very pessimistic viewpoint. It's likely not going to be like that, but it could be. So we'll see what happens and check back in with you every week right here to be your comfort, chaos, and hopefully not talk about things so depressing in the future. And with that, enjoy the fuckery.